I grew up mainly with Nintendo consoles, my first ever console being an NES. Later, my uncle would go on to give me his old Super Nintendo, and finally, my parents would buy me a Nintendo 64 for Christmas. The only game I owned for the Nintendo 64 was Mario Kart 64 because I had to share the console with my siblings. It wasn't until Christmas when I was 8 years old that I received a console that was solely my own. My aunt had actually repackaged an old waffle maker box, and inside was, well, my very first console, the Sega Genesis. Now, my Sega Genesis came with a myriad of games. So I had Sonic 1, 2, Pac-Man 2, The New Adventures, if anyone remembers that game, Paperboy, and I also had a bunch of random sports titles. But also, at the very bottom of this box, was the game I would play above all the others. And that game was Haunting, Starring Polterguy. Now, Haunting, Starring Polterguy is a game that's very near and dear to my heart. But it didn't really end up in my games library on purpose. It was just there, and I would have never played the game otherwise. I'd never heard of it, nothing about it. It was just there. And with how much blood and gore is in this game, I'm surprised I was able to play it at all, because my parents don't really like obscene things, and as a child, they wouldn't let me play any video game that had any sort of obscene anything in it. Alright, enough about how I actually came to obtain this game. Let's get down to talking about why this game is one of the most memorable games on the Sega Genesis. Haunting, Starring Polterguy released in 1993 and was praised immediately. It was called unique, fun, and a scary good time by reviewers of the time. The reviews from back then all praised it highly, which makes sense since the game was well made and no other game had really done anything similar to it. The game would go on to gain a cult following in the years since its release, and I mean, how could it not, when a reviewer called it a scary good time? This was a Genesis game, so it kinda lacked a full story, but here's a little tidbits that you get from the opening and the manual. Haunting, Starring Polterguy is a game about a rebellious teen ghost named Polterguy, who is trying to enact his ghostly vengeance. You see, when Polterguy was alive, and most likely not named Polterguy, he had an accident caused by faulty parts on his skateboard. It's not mentioned exactly how he died though, so my guess is the board exploded. The skateboard was manufactured by a business owned by a money-grubbing man named Vito Sardini. As a newly born vengeful spirit, Polterguy now wants to haunt Vito's family out of their homes and enact that ghostly vengeance I mentioned before. Vito has the standard nuclear family. Vito, the father, his wife Flo, who no matter what is always found firstly in the kitchen. I feel like there's a joke there, but I'm not going to reach for it. Vito and Flo have 2 kids, a son named Tony, how very Italian of you, and a daughter named Mimi. And wow, Mimi has the most terrifying face I've ever seen. Like she's scarier than the ghost character. Not just scary, but the ugliest little girl I've ever seen. And that's the basics of the story. It's enough to give you a gameplay loop that is actually a ton of fun to play. The game starts with a quick story scroll across the screen as Polterguy watches the family move into their new home. It then just plops you in the house, and the first thing you'll see is that the game is at a 3/4 angle. Definitely not something common for games at the time. It definitely made it more interesting to look at though. Alright, let's take a moment to look at our character. He just oozes that late 80s, early 90s fashion. He's got the leather jacket, the ripped jeans, and take a look at that mohawk. This guy's the pinnacle of the era's fashion choices and what everyone thought was cool. Now all he needs is an electric guitar, and he could be any member of Def Leppard. He's not so ghostly looking, except for the fact that he's green and floating. I guess the developers must have watched Ghostbusters a lot when designing him, and listened to nothing but hair metal. The perfect word to describe him would be radical, I suppose. The game may have had a lot going for it style-wise. I mean, those are pretty rad designs, right? But what did it actually play like? So, the gameplay. Well, you're a ghost whose only goal is to scare this family out of their home. You can float around the house and haunt different items in the rooms that the targets are in, which is the main gameplay loop. You can haunt almost everything in the homes, from the furniture to the walls and everything in between. Each one activates a different scare that'll play out in a creepy 16-bit gore animation. The main reason this game stuck with me since childhood was the animations of the scares. You could haunt this TV, and now the head is coming out of the top. Haunt the rug, and then blood is oozing everywhere now. I'm in the chainsaw now. Guess it's time to fly around and spin in circles. These are just some of the scare animations in the first 2 houses. With 4 houses in total, you get to see many of these as you play. There's 400 different objects you can possess and scare with. When you walk up to a potential possession object, you'll see it light up with one of 3 different colors. Each color represents what kind of scare it'll be. The first color is blue. These are the most standard scares, and they require your target to walk up to the possessed item before it'll activate. Next is the orange colored glows. Once you enter these objects, you'll have to press a button to activate them when you're ready to do so. These are useful for getting scare chains going and building up the family member's fear level. Finally, the green glows give you full control. You can possess certain objects and float around scaring your target in any direction you want for a short duration. These are useful for setting up other scares or getting your targets to flee in a certain direction. Every time you scare the target, their fear meter goes up. Once they get scared enough, they'll run out of the current room. You'll have to check the map to find out where they went, but once you find them, you'll have to start the process all over again. You have to get them into a room that leads outside the house, and get their fear meter to the max before they'll leave the house. Once they do, then you'll have to start the haunting all over again with the next target of your choice. Continue until every person leaves the house and you've completed the level. Now this all sounds pretty easy, and it kind of is if you know what you're doing, but you can't scare them forever. At the bottom of the screen is a green meter. This is known as your ecto tank, so said by Polterguy. It's full of ectoplasm and drains as you play the game. Every time a target leaves the room scared, some ecto will fall on the ground and replenish your timer just a little. This means you're essentially on a time limit to scare everyone out of the house before it runs empty. Once it reaches 0, Polterguy is sucked down into the underworld. Well, he actually just fizzles out of existence. In the underworld, Polterguy will have to go through these dungeon-looking levels, collecting ectoplasm that falls from the ceiling. These sections of the game are the only times that Polterguy can die and get a game over. There's arms that come out of the ground, walls, and floor that'll attack you as you go through. They're not the only hazards though, as you'll have to dodge bouncing eyeballs and bats flying into you. Polterguy's health meters in the bottom left corner, represented as a picture of the character. The more damage you take, the less of Polterguy you'll see, until you see nothing and it's game over. These parts, along with the hauntings, become the main gameplay loops. You'll scare the family members until you run out of juice, and then it's back to the underworld to recharge. Once you get enough ecto, you'll exit through a hole in the wall and go right back to haunting. Once a level is completed, you'll be sent back to recharge before the next one, so don't think you'll never have to traverse the dungeons. You'll have to scare the family across the 4 houses they move into, so you'll have plenty of chances to go to the dungeon world and get better at dodging enemies. The gameplay is fun, but I think the best part about the game are the scare animations. I mentioned them before, but they are just so cool to look at. 16-bit gore fests and funny, creepy animations that are all still pretty effective today, I think. I could go through some of my favorites, or I could just show you all my favorites in a montage. Yeah, I'll just do that. Aside from the scare animations, there's also the reactions the family has to each scare. They're so fun to watch. I mean, watching their heads explode or watching the kids wet themselves is always funny to see, especially when the ugly daughter falls to the ground and starts crying. These animations are cool, but they do repeat in every house, which I don't mind because look at this. The vibe of the animations even further shows the 80s, 90s vibe I referred to before. They just seem like every slasher film from that time frame. Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street definitely seem like big inspirations for the scare animations. Actually, some of these are just straight up parodies to popular horror movies from the 80s. The 16-bit animation just makes them a little less scary and more charming. It really makes you wonder how a game like this would play today. They'd probably still be a little cartoony, which keeps the game from ever being a true horror experience. Haunting can be played single player, but why would you do that when you can play with a friend? Yeah, the game had a multiplayer mode. The second player just needed to press start on the title screen, and now you had 2 Polterguys to haunt the family with. I pretty much exclusively played multiplayer as a kid, since I had siblings I had to share my stuff with. I'm not complaining though, 2 players made the game a little easier actually. You each had your own ecto tank to worry about, and you could easily scare the family out of the house on one run with 2 people. You did still have to go to the underworld and collect ecto, so this time you were competing with each other to grab it and be the first person to leave. Whoever exited first would go first into the next house. The multiplayer made the game a lot more fun, as you and your friends could all take turns scaring everyone out of the house. I distinctly remember ordering pizza, watching some horror movies, and then playing this game with my friends on a Friday night. Once you run the family out of their 4 homes, you'll have to fight the family chihuahua as it turns into a demon. This fight isn't so bad if you didn't get hit much in the dungeon world. Once you beat the final boss, the game ends, roll credits. Which brings us to the end of one of my favorite Sega Genesis games of all time. This game seriously was a lot of fun with friends, or even alone. I have such great memories of watching all the cool scare animations and showing them to my friends. Haunting Starring Polterguy is such an interesting game. Like, it didn't really match the other games that came out around the same time. The amount of horror games on any home console was slim to none, so this game really stood out as being one of a kind. Is it worth picking up today? Absolutely, especially if you've never played it or want something to play that's not too scary. Especially with Halloween right around the corner. Now is the perfect time to pick this game up, or back up if you've already played it. It's kind of a shame this game never got a sequel or franchise, considering it truly was a scary good time. Though I wouldn't really call this game scary, the scariest thing about this game is that it was created by EA. And that was Haunting Starring Polterguy. Honestly, this game's one of my favorites from the Sega Genesis. Like, I don't think any other game on the console really does quite what this game was able to accomplish. The animations were super gory, but they were also kind of like charming in their own way. They weren't super over the top. I guess some of them were, but they just kind of made the whole game altogether really cool. I don't think I've ever played a game quite like it. Hey everyone, you made it to the end of the video. What can I say? This was a lot of fun to make, honestly. It took me a little bit longer than I would have liked. I had to like learn how to do video stuff. Obviously, I'm still new to the camera. So my mic was kind of weird, so it's like here, it's not in frame. I don't know if that matters. I might just put it in frame anyways because I'm getting kind of an echoey sound effect. Anyways, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed the content, please leave a comment down below letting me know what I can improve on, what you want to see in the next video. And I'll make sure to try to implement those things as I do more videos. So, yeah, if you like the content, please leave a comment, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys all in the next one.